Hello everybody, Sparkster1701 here. It's time for another GoBots review. And here we've got the Guardian GoBot, Sparky. Sparky was brought into the line in mid to late 1985 and would be discontinued in 1986 when the line ended. Sparky, of course, is another one of the female GoBots, and she did make a fair number of appearances in the Challenge of the GoBots cartoon. However, she was portrayed on there as a rather unlucky character. Things always didn't seem to go right for her, so she spent a fair amount of time whining about that. So, unfortunately, that's probably not the best way to portray the character, and hopefully, if the GoBots ever get a modern reinterpretation, maybe they will improve upon that. At any rate, let's take a closer look at her. And she is a relatively sturdy toy. I mean, a fair amount of her is plastic, but her main body here is solid metal. And as you can probably see from her head, she does suffer a fair amount of chrome wear, as there are plenty of red blotches on her head where the chrome has rubbed off from multiple bits of play wear. This is one that I had growing up as a child, so naturally, as you can see, she went on to a fair amount of adventures. And even better, authentic rubber tires here are also present on the toy. That's probably the only loose accessory she has, is the fact that these tires can be removed, as you can see there. I'm not going to take it totally off, so I don't want to take a chance that I'll break these things after 30 plus years. At any rate, let's take a look at her articulation, and she's got a fair amount of articulation. You can raise her arm at the shoulder about so far, and she can rotate at the shoulder all the way around. Since she does have a good hinge and ball joint at the shoulder, her arms can be moved in a wide variety of positions. Down at her legs, she can do a full splits, since that's more for her conversion process. Speaking of her conversion process, let's go ahead and start in on that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to fold her feet in. And we're going to come around back here and we're going to lower her upper body like so. We'll take her legs and rotate them all the way around and put them together. And we'll raise her head section so it forms the front end of the car. Her arms we straighten out and fold up into the sides of her head and body, like so. Then back underneath, we will take her head and fold it into the body. And there you have her in car mode. She is based to resemble a Pontiac Fiero, the same car that the Transformer Punch Counterpunch also transforms into. But the Transformer becomes a nice blue car, but this red isn't too bad on her. And they at least made a better attempt on this toy than on many of them that were red, as the metal and plastic often doesn't match. But in this case here, it does line up pretty good. It's not 100% perfect, but it does work in this instance. I mean, it's not easily coming through here on the camera. You gotta have it at just the right angles, and you'd be able to tell that the red's not entirely the same, but other than that, it does come off as a little bit better than many of them did in the GoBots line. Turbo's a decent example. Probably the best, most famous example is Spoiler, where you can easily tell the difference between the plastic and the metal, and that just hurts the appearance of the vehicle mode. Now, of course, since Sparky's on rubber tires, she should roll pretty good. And boy, does she. She does roll very excellent for a car toy of her age. And the rubber tires do seem to be holding up pretty well on her. Or at least on this example, and like I said, I did play with this one quite a bit growing up. Now we get down to my thoughts. What do I think of Sparky? Sparky here is a decent character. I've never been shy to admit that I always enjoyed the fact that Tonka and Hanna-Barbera did push to include more female GoBots in the line. Even in the early stages of the GoBots creation by Tonka, they did have a few of the characters slated to be female. So they did intend to push having girl characters in what would be a predominantly boys' toy line. Even though, as it's commonly been known throughout the 1980s, girl characters in boys' toy lines were always poor sellers. And Hasbro certainly has the numbers to back that up with their G.I. Joe toy line. As for just about every year for the first 5 years or so of the Real American Hero line, there was at least one female brought into the line every year. And statistically, they were always the weakest sellers. With some possible exceptions, of course. Mattel also knew that as well with their Masters of the Universe line. And here we are, we have a GoBot that's also female. But unless you were an avid follower of the cartoon, you really didn't know that about the characters, since Tonka's packaging never gave away anything about them except whether they were friendly or evil. As for how Sparky was presented, the only thing we have to go by is the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, and like I said, she did appear numerous times in the line there, in the episodes of the cartoon. However, she constantly whined a fair amount about how things didn't seem to go the way she wanted them to. So that kind of leaves her as being somewhat of an inexperienced character, which, while there's nothing wrong with that, the constant nagging about things not going the way you want them to does get a little old. And it's a trope that really doesn't hold up well anymore in the modern age. So like I said earlier, if Hasbro were to consider doing a new modern interpretation of the GoBots, she would definitely need a little work done to her to make her a better character. There's nothing wrong with having a character that's inexperienced, but constantly whining about how things don't go your way certainly is not acceptable in the modern world, especially if it's going to be presented through the eyes of a female character. But that's just my opinion, and I do apologize in advance if I do offend any of my viewers with this opinion. But that's just my thoughts. Overall, in general, I like to keep Sparky in the middle tier for the toy collection. As the toy itself, it is a pretty good toy all around. She's got just enough metal in it to keep the toy at a tough stage, and she is slightly more complicated than most of the other GoBots or even many of the Transformers at this same scale. So that always will make her a decent sort of toy. The only downside that we really have to her is, as I said, her presentation in the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. So hopefully, if there is a considered revival for the GoBots, that can be improved. And that concludes my review of the Guardian GoBot Sparky. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, drop us a thumbs up here on YouTube. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button down below and join up in our ranks. Make sure you ring the notification bell so you'll be notified when I post new content. And also, please consider sharing your thoughts about Sparky in the comments section down below. This is Sparkster1701 saying I will catch you all later.